In this tutorial, we're going to be going over how to draw lines in Adobe Illustrator. First, we're going to be taking a closer look at the line segment tool, which I already have selected. This is a pretty straightforward tool. It just draws straight lines from one point to another by just clicking, dragging, and releasing. Under this tool, we also have several different line tool options. If we click and hold, you'll see all the different tools that can also be used. I'm going to go ahead and just expand that out. So we also have an arc tool, which will just freehand draw an arc for us. Spiral tool, rectangular grid tool, and polar grid tool, which we're going to be going over those in a separate movie. But for these tools, it is important to note that instead of just freehanding the lines or click and holding shift to draw straight lines in either 45 or 90-degree angles, we also have the option of just clicking once on the canvas. And when we do that, the line segment tool options window pops up, asking for a length and an angle, which is a more precise way of drawing lines in Adobe Illustrator. For this one, I'm going to be drawing a 3-inch line, so I'm just going to type in 3 inches. And I want the line to be at 45 degrees. And just hit OK. And there's my line. Other tools to draw lines in Adobe Illustrator include the pencil tool, the paintbrush tool, and the pen tool. Recently, Adobe Illustrator updated their pencil tool, and it's a very useful tool to use for freehand drawing. I'm going to select the pencil tool, and if I just click and drag my mouse, it'll begin drawing. And if I get close to the beginning point, you'll notice the pointer changes from a star to a circle, and that means that it's asking to close the line. And if I release it, it'll actually create a shape, a closed shape, instead of just an open line. The lines that I had drawn previously using the line tool are just individual lines. So if I wanted to pull them together to create, say, a rectangle, I would have to drag the anchor points together, try to align them, and then using the direct selection tool, select both points, right-click on them, and hit join for each one. Now those 2 points are joined, and I would have to do that for each subsequent line until I could close the line. For example, drawing a new line, anchoring to the anchor point, to the second anchor point, and at this stage, these 2 lines are still separate. Undo. So I would still have to join yet these 2 points, as well as these 2, to create a true closed geometry. With the pencil tool, it's much easier. All I have to do is draw my shape, and then when I get close to the beginning point, it'll just ask to close and I can release. I can also just draw lines. And you can see that as I draw these lines, the pencil tool is smart enough to draw in control points for that line for me. So I can go back with my direct selection tool, select each individual point, and adjust. Another nice feature of the pencil tool is that when I'm freehanding, let's say that I ended there, I can actually pick up where I left off. You can see that the regular icon is a star, but as I approach a point that can actually be continued, it'll change to a dash. And I can just continue clicking from there, and actually continued my line. And it's all a joint geometry. And I can go back, continue my line, and close it at a later time. With the pencil tool, if before I start drawing, I hold the Shift key, it can draw straight lines as well. And when I hold the Shift key, it'll actually snap these straight lines to 45-degree increments. So I could potentially be doing a freehand sketch, and all of a sudden I decide that I want it to be a straight line from here on out. And I can do that, which is very useful. If I were to try to do that with the line segment tool, it will snap to that anchor point and align it, but it will not actually join the geometry. I'm going to do a Control A so I can select all the geometry and hit delete so we can clean up our artboard a little bit. And if I hit the H key, it will switch over to the hand tool so I can pan over a little bit better. So that's an overview of the pencil tool. We also have the Paintbrush tool, which is more freehand version. Before I forget, it is also important to note that with the pencil tool, if you double click on it, it'll actually give you pencil tool options. It'll range in the fidelity of how accurate you want it to follow your mouse motion. So if I switch this, for example, all the way over to accurate, and then use the pencil tool and draw, you'll see that it's drawn a lot more points than if I switch it over to smooth and try to trace a similar line. Look at the difference of how many points this one has versus the first one that I drew. Usually I like to keep mine at a very smooth setting so it can produce a better looking geometry. You also have additional options for filling pencil strokes, which we'll discuss in a later movie. Keeping selected, Alt key toggles to smooth tool, and edit selected paths within a number of pixels. And hit OK. Last but not least, we have the pen tool. And the pen tool is a tool used by Adobe Illustrator to draw both straight lines and curved lines, also known as Bezier curves. So with the pen tool, if I just click and then click on a second location, it draws a straight line from point to point. But if I click and drag, it creates what's known as a Bezier curve, which is a curve that's controlled by a tangent, which we can then manipulate using the direct selection tool. Similar to the pencil tool, the pen tool can be used to continue drawing or to close a shape. Under the pen tool options, we have options to add an anchor point tool, which will just add additional points within already drawn geometry, which we can then use with the direct selection tool to modify the shape. There's also Delete Anchor Point tool, which, as its name suggests, it deletes anchor points. And last but not least, there's the Anchor Point tool, which will help us edit those Bezier curves and help us edit those tangents. With the Direct Selection tool, all we can do is shrink or rotate the handles that control the Bezier curves. But with the Anchor Point tool, we can actually break up these handles and have them work independently from one another. I encourage you to explore these tools on your own time and get a good handle for how these behave. In the next video, we'll be taking a look at some additional basic tools in Adobe Illustrator.